Hi, I'm Peter from Coffee Parts, and today we got the production models of the new Mythos coffee grinders. And to make things extra special, we got André Eiermann here, part of the development team, to actually explain these in detail and get into the really geeky bits and pieces.
Thank you for having me today, and especially having me to talk about the new Mythos range.
I feel like we're almost hiding behind the machines. They're actually taking a fair bit of presence. They're such beautiful machines, and they've really evolved from the original Mythos one, and they're now just called the Mythos. And there's actually two models. So we've got the 75 and 85, and the numbers reflect the blade size, so 75mm and 85mm. And within that, they've got the timer model and the gravimetric. Obviously timer based on time, you know, your standard, you might be running 8 seconds or whatever that might be, and your gravimetric based on weight. So there's 4 models in the range. We're going to talk a bit later why you would pick a 75 on 85mm blades and how that affects not only in time, but whether you're doing a milk-based coffee or black. But first things first, the main changes from the original one is they've now got 2 fans on the back instead of one on the back and one on the side, so you can bank them up. And that was a common thing where cafes wanted to really bank them up together, so you could be running different blends or whatever it might be, speed up your workflow. They've also changed the Clump Crusher and made it a lot easier to replace. And we've now got a bit more control of the temperature. So it's not a set temperature at 40 degrees, it's between 20 and 50 degrees at the group head. These are kind of just like, almost like going through the specs, but we're gonna dive in and really understand what the differences are. So first difference, 75 and 85mm blades. I think that's a big one.
Absolutely. So the Mythos one came with 75mm burrs. You all know the grinder, it became a legend. It was also the first grinder that had the Climate Pro technology and the Clump Crusher. And it's a well-established grinder, but we saw that in super busy cafes, especially during peak time, we needed to be even more productive. So that's why we came up with the 85mm burrs. That will give us up to 30% faster grind time.
And so you're getting a faster grind time, but there's still a use case for the 75mm. So what's the use case for the 75?
Absolutely. I would say if you want to serve, and that's unfortunately not the majority in Australia, if you want to have the perfect black coffee, a long black or a pure espresso, the 85mm burrs, they will give you beautiful flavor clarity. As a barista, you can work on the acidity, the taste balance, and you can really make the beautiful flavors shine.
That's on the 85?
That's the 85.
And with the temperature control, I understand now it goes between 20 and 50 degrees. What was the reasoning by this and how is it being controlled?
So when we developed the Mythos one, we were looking at a consistent dose into the portafilter, but not only in terms of the dose into the portafilter, also when it comes to the particle size distribution. And when we did research with the university, we found out that we will get the most consistent particle size distribution when we grind around 40 degrees. So when you came in the morning, you started to dial in your espressos, maybe the blades were a little bit colder, and here the place was not yet warmed up. You had a different particle size distribution compared when you were fully running the grinder. So that was the original idea, to really control the temperature to have a consistent dose and particle size distribution. But then in the super busy cafes here in Australia, we figured out that it was sometimes too much for the grinder.
Yeah.
And it started to overheat.
Yeah, that's the issue. They were having a bit of an overshoot.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where many baristas, especially here in Australia, they unplugged the Climate Pro. And that's sad, because it would have given the most consistency, but now we have given the choice between 20 to 50 degrees. So if you are in a super busy cafe, you can put the grinder at 20 degrees. That's more or less ambient temperature. So the grinder will start cooling straight away.
Yeah, and that's made a big difference, because I do remember people unplugging the cable and it was quite awkward, but being able to have that controlled now really ups the game in consistency. One thing I've always actually liked, and it's a simple thing, is the ability to dial in and reset your position. I know that's probably the smallest detail on this machine and not the key feature, but it's always been something that's really easy, even in our warehouse, just between people, to know where you're moving and what your set point is.
I think this tiny little feature would also help you to reduce waste.
Yeah.
And I think a little tip for the baristas is to understand once a little tick, when you change it, either coarser or finer, just monitor how much a change in the grinder setting by one tick will influence your shot time.
Yeah.
That will be that will give you a good indication to easier set the grinding. And for example, if you want to increase your shot time by 4 seconds, that will be roughly about 2 little ticks, and then you will have exactly your 4 seconds more or less, and that will help you to be less wasteful.
Yeah, and just having that ability to change your set point and being able to communicate with someone, move this much from that position, I think makes a big difference, especially when you've got multiple people on the same machine.
Another feature is when you set the grinder, it's actually the back burr that will move. So once at night when you open the grinder to clean it, yep, you open it and you close it, it will still have the same grinder setting. That's another feature of this that will help you to really make simple adjustments without wasting too much coffee and being consistent every time.
I guess for those that are not familiar with the Mythos, the blades are actually just sitting just here. So when you remove this front panel, the Climber Pro, there's one blade there and there's one blade there. So effectively, that's why they're pretty much, is it zero retention or very close to it these days? Because the blades end just there and you've got the tiniest of exit chute.
I wouldn't call it zero retention, because no grinder has zero retention. There is always a place, because the fines, it's nearly impossible to control. But by the way we angle the burrs, we definitely minimize the amount of coffee that is stuck in the burr chamber, as it literally falls out in a pretty straight manner.
Moving away from the burrs and the dialing in, one very obvious difference is the front panel here, the display, and
yep,
how has that really changed from the early Mythos 1 to the current Mythos? It does look 100 times better, but what else are you gaining from there and how has it changed?
So first of all, I think it just looks super slick, no? It really looks
look
cool. Unfortunately, you can't see how cool the touchpad is also to touch. It's really on details, easy, super reactive, and the menu is very intuitive. I think that was a huge success of the Mythos 1. The display was simple but easy to use. Anyone could understand quickly, and that's what we have now also put into the new Mythos range.
I do like that it's got physical buttons and not just touch screen, because hitting a button does make it a lot easier, especially when you're busy or you've got wet hands.
We had this discussion when we were working on the touch screen, and I was like, oh, do we really need that? And especially for the younger ones, they grew up with mobile phones, with iPads, with iPhones. They are used to touch screens, but the little bit more old school baristas, they still like to touch a physical button, and as you say, get the feedback when you touch. That's why we integrated both.
Yeah, so that's something I really like, just being able to touch between them and get that sense. Sometimes with the touchscreen, especially with moving away from grinders, but on coffee machines, I find that they don't touch exactly where you want it and get frustrated, especially with wet hands.
Yep.
So very simple, but something nice. With these hoppers, they're the same hopper size, or they look to me the same as the Mythos 1. Is that right?
Yeah, they are more or less the same size. We just have changed slightly the angle of the hopper.
Yep.
So in the Mythos 1, the baristas, they remember this move. That's when you move the coffee beans into the grinding chamber. That's why we have slightly changed the angle, so the beans will move more easily.
So basically a more aggressive angle.
Absolutely.
And you were in the Mythos one, you were able to get the extended hoppers for super busy cafes.
Yes.
That's still an option on
We
these?
have given the feedback to the team in Italy to have a look at it.
Make the hoppers taller, because that's one thing. There's just so many cafes in Australia doing big numbers that they just want to be dumping 3 kilos in.
You do big numbers. I was really surprised. Now I'm here in Australia for 3 months, so it's absolutely amazing to see your Aussie cafe culture and the sheer amount of coffee that goes through a grinder and through a coffee machine.
Now this one here is a timer model.
Yep.
The more interesting one, I guess, is the gravimetric. So that's been, many grinders have tried to go down the weight path, and there are grinders out there that have gone there. Yep. But it's still new, and it's still something that some people are hesitant on. Like, I feel like every barista that has a scale that they're weighing in and weighing out wants it, but some are hesitant. How's the technology being built? How's it working? How consistent it is? Does it pick up straight away? I feel there are questions that people might have in the back of their head.
So maybe some behind the scenes info that nobody has seen or heard before. When we have been working on that grinder, we worked with a team of 5. And these 5 people working on the grinder, one was a mathematician from a university. Then we had like one old school screwdriver technician and 3 software engineers. So when we look how we develop this grinder, it's a lot about software development. And when I have personally been working on it, we actually connected it to a computer. And whenever we put in a portafilter, one of the software engineers could see in real lifetime what's happening with the portafilter, what's happening with the distribution of the coffee grounds. And that's how we worked on.
And I believe you put in parameters that if for whatever reason there's vibrating, like a truck's gone out the front of a cafe and there's been vibration and it hasn't registered the portafilter, there is cut-offs that just go, okay, we know roughly what weight it is and we'll just go, it'll be a little bit less accurate, but we will. So you do have like kind of, I guess, catch-all safety mechanisms.
So how we develop this grinder? First, you imagine we have like one team that worked on the pure development, and they worked on it and they tested it on lab conditions. So you put in the portafilter, everybody stands away, waiting for a minute to the grinder to do whatever it does. No vibration, nobody did anything. And once the grinder was developed to the final stage for that particular reason, I took over and I tested it under real barista conditions.
Environment.
So you start
fridge motor, old fridge motor vibrates
absolutely,
under the counter,
or you have
goes through.
a second grinder next to it. You have someone hitting the milk jug to get the bubbles out. You have someone hitting the table, walking in.
Probably not with this machine, but you might have an internal motor and pump on a coffee machine. I doubt that these machines will be put next to that kind of machine, but yeah, a lot of variables.
You never know. So we have worked on the software and we found out 2 things. First of all, vibrations for a grinder are tricky. So whenever there are too many vibrations, the software will think and go back to what it measured before. And it will take those values from the past and it's a set timeout and it will start grinding. So compared to the Mythos 2 Gravimetric, you can't compare. It starts grinding pretty much immediately.
Because that was a frustration of some people that have gone Mythos or otherwise, to be fair, and they've put in the portafilter, hasn't registered straight away. They're busy in service, they just want it to register, and the only way to do that was to go a bit wider in the variance. And in this case, you basically solve that, but you can still have a tight variance, but if something vibrates, happens, it just picks up the previous shot.
It's a learning algorithm. So that makes the grinder so special, and for me it was fantastic to see how that works and how you put that into place because the grinder has no eyes. It doesn't know that the portafilter is in the fork or not. So once you start grinding, even if you change the grind setting, it will need 1, max 2, 3 grinds and then it's recalibrated again, and it will always go back and see what happened in the past. We also integrated a bar, so you see the progress of the grinding.
Yep.
And while grinding, it will be a red bar.
Yep.
And once the grinder finished grinding, it will turn into blue.
Okay, and you just know, ready to collect
During
your portafilter.
peak times, if the barista will not watch and might just take it out,
Yeah.
that was when we saw the grinder would potentially be less precise.
Yep.
And that's how we programmed it together with the software engineers and the mathematician. If during peak time you would take out the portafilter too quickly, it will just go back, think what happened in the past, and adjust the algorithm accordingly.
So going from the original Mythos one to this Mythos, recapping, we've gone from only having 75mm blades to having 75 and 85.
Yep.
We've added the introduction of the gravimetric, so the ability to grind by weight.
Yep.
You've changed the angle of the hopper to stop people having to pull it in. We've given it the ability, or not we, but you guys, given the ability to turn off or to control between 20 and 50 degrees rather than having to pull the cable, so you fix that. You've made the Clump Crusher a lot easier to replace. Still the plastic Clump Crusher because they were the best solution, but easier to replace. And you've completely made the GUI and the interface. It looks hot. Like, we'll play with it a bit later, but it's just so intuitive. It actually looks very similar to another grinder that I personally like, and it just really, which is also made by you guys. So I'm actually referring to the Eureka Special Leader. But you really have kind of listened to the feedback from baristas and from retailers, and kind of feels like and the fans, moving it from the side to the back, and bigger fans.
And we have listened to one more feedback.
Yep.
So it's the baristas, the cafe owners, the roasters, but we have also listened to the technicians. So one thing we haven't talked about it, here you see the 4 screws on the side. There will be another 4 on the other side. So you would just unscrew those 4 and 4, and you can take off the whole body like a coat, and you have easy access to all the internal parts of the grinder. So from the tech perspective, they will love the Mythos because it's super easy to access.
I mean, that just makes sense. I know we deal with a lot of coffee roasters, and their issue is if the grinder stops, the cafe stops. And very rarely do grinders play up, but if they do, sometimes it's something tiny like a capacitor. But on some grinders, it just takes so long to get to the capacitor. You got to turn them upside down, you got beans in them, you got to take the bottom plates out. Being able to take just 4 screws and the panel out just makes something like changing a capacitor effectively literally a 5-minute job.
Yep, absolutely. And here in the front, you only have the 2 screws. That's also a little easier compared to the Mythos 1, where there were 4 screws.
Right, I forgot about that. It was 4 screws.
Because in Australia you clean the grinder pretty much daily, so that will definitely help you to be a little bit faster, and also...
I can see they're really big screws, so it's very easy to get a stubby screwdriver in there and turn them. It's not fiddly small ones.
Also the screws for the Clump Crusher compared to the Mythos 1, a technician will love and smile and said they finally listened to us. So we really went back. So the Mythos 1 has been developed by 3 world barista champions and 1 super experienced top-notch barista. And for the new Mythos, we went back, we asked baristas, we asked cafe owners, and we asked technicians to really give us feedback, what worked well and didn't work that well on the Mythos, to really move forward with the latest range of the Mythos.
I'm really liking listening to all this, but I think the #1 question, people are going to want to see these grinders in action. So we're going to change things up, and Andre's going to get on the machines. We're going to do a switcheroo, and you're going to go through and show people the menus, show things how it actually work. We've talked about it. So let's just dive in and let's swap around.
With pleasure. So here we go. You can choose the doses. 1, 2, and 3. You can do that via the touch screen, or if you're more old school, you can also push the buttons, and that's how you can choose your dose. If you want to change the dose, you just click on that dose, increase, decrease, and that's it. So it's pretty straightforward. super intuitive, nothing to think about.
I think one thing I forgot to preface is we're on the gravimetric now, so that dose is in grams and not time. I think we forgot to mention that, so just clearing that up.
Good point. If you like to turn the gravimetric into a timer version, that would also be possible. You would just go here, and then I need to take my glasses off, put the timer mode on, and then you can even turn the Gravimetric version into a timer. That's it. Once we entered here the menu, you can also adjust the accuracy. That will speed up the grinding process, but I believe with the software and the learning algorithm, you can leave it at 0.1 gram plus minus, and the grinder will be fast enough to do its job. So here again, you have the doses up and down. That's it. The big change is the Climate Pro, and that would be here. So you can now move your grinder from 20 up to 50 degrees in half a degree steps. This would be ambient temperature. You save it, and then the fans will kick in, and then they will cool to keep your grind consistent at all time. The biggest question I have been asked is, how fast is the new Mythos Gravimetric? How long is the tara time? And with the latest software, it literally starts pretty much immediately. On the screen, you can also follow the progress from red, and once the grind is finished, the color will turn into blue, and then you can take it out. And what you can also see on the screen, it shows you the real dose out into the portafilter. So for this grind we wanted 22 grams. The grinder for this particular case was 22.2 grams. So you have the real reading of what's in your portafilter.
I think not in regards to the screen, but one cool thing, and we sort of mentioned it early in the conversation, but I noticed even with the Mythos 1, when we're sometimes at cafes, not everyone realized that the bottom dial here does move. So you can set it to 0, and then you can move from that. So I mentioned earlier that it's easy between baristas to say, just move it this much. And instead of having to say we're in position 8, go position 9, and there's variance obviously depending on how the burrs are. Having that you can set to 0, it's the smallest of things, like there's no tech in that, it's an extra ring. But I found that it really does make a difference, even within us, within our team at the warehouse, that we can just dial it in a lot quicker and a lot easier.
Absolutely. You just put it to 0, and then maybe during the day, you will a little bit go finer, then you will go coarser, and then you finish the shift at night, you will restart in the morning. So the easiest thing would be you go back to 0, and that would be your easygoing starting point in the morning to start dialing in your espresso. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we also talked about the cleaning side. It's just how easy it is to open the front plate or to change the Clump Crusher. We've got a screwdriver here. Did you want to just show them really quickly how quickly it does come apart?
To do that, we would need to quickly just grind out what's in the grinder, and then we can easily access both the Clump Crusher as well as the Burr chamber to clean everything at night. What we would do, we would switch off the grinder. We can remove the hopper. Here we have the cable to unplug, and if we want to access the grinding chamber, we just need to open the screw here to the left. So I'm obviously not a technician, but it's really easy. Any barista in a cafe can do that. You just unscrew, and you have direct access to your Burr chamber. And you can clean inside here and here, and that's done.
Super easy, obviously super easy to change the blade if you needed to as well.
Yep.
But being titanium coated, they will last a while.
So once you unscrew the two screws, you can just remove the chute and the Clump Crusher. It is pre-folded and it goes on this piece of metal. According to the Burr size, it says either 75 or 85. Once it's clean, you just put it on once again, place it inside.
And then slide it back in.
And slide it back in.
A lot easier than the previous one.
Here we go. Put the two screws and you're all done.
There's been so much testing you guys have done, and this grinder does feel polished compared to the previous one.
It's a lot of work that went into it, and I'm happy that we have here the first production model in Australia, and that also shows that our team in Italy is listening to the Australian market, because from a global perspective, Australia is really leading the specialty coffee game, and that's why we received the first grinders into Australia and into our lab to really work on them ourselves, but also then to give it to baristas and to get their feedback.
I'm actually excited for it because when you first launched the Mythos one, it was really one of our highest selling grinders. Like, we sold so many of them. At a point where it was crazy. We just didn't think that the sales could keep going, and they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And obviously now they're paused. Mythos 1 sort of became dated. There was a bit of a gap. I'm kind of excited to see what Mythos will redo and if it's the same hype. Now that I can see how well Mythos 1 did work and the changes you've made, I'm kind of interested to see. It's going to be an interesting year. Definitely going to be an interesting year.
Absolutely. I mean, we have taken all the good things from the Mythos 1. Yeah. And we have listened now over the years to the baristas, roasters, cafes and technicians, what kind of changes they would need, and we have integrated them into the new range. We have definitely updated the Gravimetric software, so you have seen it's much faster. It's not too sensitive, and there is even a timeout, so if there is too much vibration, it will just start grinding. And it has a learning system integrated, so it will see what you do. If it gives too much or too little, it will adjust. And that just makes the whole grinding game easier.
So now we're looking at the Mythos. This happens to be the 85, so the bigger of the two blades. But what we're really looking at is this is a timer model, so it doesn't weigh the shots. Very, very similar, but do you want to just go through how to adjust the timing?
Yep. Absolutely. So that is the timer version. So here, like in the good old times, you select your dose, you reduce the grind time, you increase the grind time, you go out and it's set. So it's not a difficult menu. You can just click on it, click a second time, plus, minus, and it's done.
It really is quick. Obviously, because when you grind fine, you got to lift your time, and it's just very quick to kind of collaborate between the two.
Absolutely. If you want to purge, you can have this function as well. So you can switch it on, you can switch it off, and then you would here have the purging function, where you can purge if you have changed the grinder setting. Otherwise, it's pretty much a normal timer version. Again, here you have the possibility to adjust the temperature in between the burrs. Again, you can go down to 20 degrees, pretty much ambient temperature, and up to 50 degrees. Again, you don't need to go into a complicated menu. That would be it. It's really straightforward, pretty much as the Mythos 1. Now you just have a very intuitive menu on a touch screen, and before you had to go and work with buttons.
Yeah, I like it. It's just simple.
We have also adjusted the fork slightly, so you will engage the portafilter. You will see that It will hold the portafilter so you can grind and do something else in the meantime. And with the new fork, it will really make sure that the coffee is nicely distributed all over. Not much will fall around, so really clean grinding.
Also, with this fork compared to the previous Mythos, it does fit all the portafilters. So whether you have a portafilter like this or the Lama Zorco portafilter, now it's just one fork, no need to change between, right?
Absolutely. You have the screws here. You can just unscrew and then you can adjust the distance, so it will absolutely take any portafilter on the market. No need to get an extra fork for whatever machine you're using.
Yeah, because that was a common extra we were selling, was the Lama Zorco fork, so everyone had to buy Mythos 1 grinder plus the fork. Now,
sorry for your business. Now you don't need.
It was good for us. It did make me feel bad for the cafes at the end of the day, but it obviously, you know, we did sell a lot of them.
Mm. And a small detail, so here you see MY85, so you see the model you have, because from the back they all look the same. So if you are really into design and the architecture and the interior design of your cafe is important to you, from the back you have the machine, you have the grinder, 2, 3 or even 4, whatever model, they absolutely look the same.
Talking about design, one thing I like, and I've said it before in other videos, and I think sometimes people laugh at me about this, but I like that the power cable comes from the bottom. So if you want that seamless look in your cafe, you can drill out your holes and all the power drops down. There's no power coming out the side or the back. And because the power switch is also on the front, you can really bank them up. So you can have that really neat, seamless look, no cables. They sit quite low so you don't see the cable under it. You can make it really that beautiful, streamlined look. And that's probably more of a me thing, but it's something I do like when people do design and think about the overall look, you know, both from a customer side, barista side, if you're in an island or if it's against a wall, it looks good from all directions.
It's all about details. Another detail that we integrated, most baristas from the Mythos 1, they will remember, once you switched it on, there was this very unique beep sound that we have integrated again. Because when I was talking to baristas, they were always saying like, in the morning when I come into the cafe, I switch on in the machine, I switch on the grinder, and this particular beep, that was like, now is the time to start the day. That's why we have integrated it again as a small, tiny little detail, because specialty coffee at the end of the day, it's all about the passion for the tiniest little detail possible.
It's about detail. And if this was the gravimetric, it would be MYG.
Yep.
75 or 85, depending on the blade size.
Correct.
Yeah, that's cool. I like them. So today we've filmed the black in the timer and gravimetric.
Yep.
They're also available in white, is that right?
Absolutely. So all 4 models, they come in black and they come in white.
Simple. So one or the other.
Very simple. That was the idea, to make the life of a barista easy, the life of the cafe owner easy, and then just to live a tasty coffee shot after shot.
Yeah. We've been fortunate enough to have André Eiermann, I'm always worried about your name, but André,
no worries, all good.
Discuss them, because his level of knowledge of these, being part of the development team, is something I couldn't give you guys. I hope we've covered everything. If we've missed anything, hit us up on the comments below, ask any questions. So thank you for coming in.
My pleasure. It was cool to have a chat with you on the grinder. The grinders actually just arrived 2 days before I arrived in Australia. So from Italy to Australia.
They're literally fresh to this studio. So they're literally unseen.
Absolutely.
If you've liked the video, please hit the thumbs up. And if you haven't already, subscribe. It really helps us grow. Thank you.